Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Cambridge Inside Out. My name's Robert Winters,
And I'm Judy Nathans.
and today is actually the day after Independence Day, July 5th, 2022.
I know.
And
Did you go to the river?
I did not go to the river. I did watch fireworks from through my kitchen window, which I
You
can
can see
see.
that?
I can actually
Oh,
see the top of the Prue and I can see it, but honestly, it's not nearly as good as being under
n-
it,
no,
and
it isn't.
I
I
just,
know.
I'm not that worried about crowds these days, like in the wonderful world of COVID, but somehow I just didn't really feel like being around a
Well,
bazillion
yeah,
people
I
this
mean, I would
time.
never be out that late for fireworks, but I did take advantage of biking all the way down Memorial Drive because it was closed. So I did that around eight
Okay.
o'clock. Yeah, it was because I've done that in the past and it's just like magical and it's fine. And people were on either side, although, they didn't have any sound, no video monitors. So I had it on my iPhone because it was on Bloomberg Radio, whatever. So I listened to a little bit of the beginning and then I just rode back before it got too dark. But
Yeah, we
that
just
was
turned off the
nice.
we just turned the lights off in the kitchen and watched it through the window.
Yeah,
But
I used to be able to
yeah,
see it from Putnam Avenue, but I could have
yeah.
walked out to Mass Ave very easily, but I didn't want to and seen it.
Anyway,
Yeah.
it's sort of a tough July 4th in some respects.
It's
I mean,
very sad what happened in Highland
yeah,
Park and
what
everything. Yeah,
that's right. That I mean, it was like
unbelievable.
I'm looking at it going like, are we all just crazy in this world? What's going
We
on here?
are.
Why can't we solve problems that do have
You know
solutions?
what? I just heard they took knives away from this kid a while ago. They took knives away, and yet he was able to buy a gun legally.
Yeah,
Give me a break. There should have been flags there, but you see, the gun legislation just isn't going. There's
I
no
know. Well,
the background checks, everything is like a
I
mess.
mean,
Mess.
one thing that kept rolling through my mind. I won't necessarily bring up the quotes here exactly, but
Yeah.
I remembered my friend David Good years ago. He actually wrote a
Mm.
nice little piece. It was
I
actually
read
specific.
that.
It was
You put that on your
specifically in the
site?
yeah,
Yeah.
but it was specifically in the wake of the end of rent control, and he basically
Oh,
was
right. Yeah.
trying to describe how the fact that rent control in Cambridge went away, whether people love it or hated it, or maybe it should have or
Hmm.
shouldn't. Well, that's not the point. But the point is that it was an existing program that was in place, and the people who were either for it or against it, or even the people who were for it, just couldn't come to some sort of resolution to do what
To
they did
tweak it, to do
to
things, to
tweak
make it
it,
better.
so
That's
that in
right.
fact they made it so that it became untenable, and they basically
Exactly.
created the movement that basically brought it to an end.
To a
and
state level,
and
right?
what I remember what David had written in this rather clever piece that was
Mm.
actually published in the Chronicle in early 1995
Mm.
was it was a phrase that it's a phrase that just keeps coming back to me. It
Yeah.
says he was talking about the various parties who were, involved in the rent
Yes.
control days, how they all benefited from the existence of a problem, and if the problem
Yeah.
went away, basically their power would vanish. And I kept thinking about that
Yeah.
in terms of national politics and thinking
Yeah.
to myself, how many political people today, how many people over the many years that you can
Yeah.
think of, basically their entire political existence is basically founded on the
Yeah.
perpetuation of a
Right.
problem that enables them
Right.
to continue to be the outspoken
Right.
person advocating for
Second Amendment, Roe versus Wade. I mean, it's like
exactly.
it's
Or
absolutist positions. Yeah.
right. I'll throw another one too, which is immigration, which it wasn't in the
Oh,
news this
that.
week,
Oh,
or
you're
maybe it
right.
was. Actually, it was. It's always in the news, to
No,
some
but they
degree.
they have not done any
But
immigration reform. Even Bush, the second Bush or whatever, first wanted to do
George
some,
W.
and they
Bush
just
had
couldn't do it.
some pretty good ideas,
Yes,
but the
I
problem
know.
was is that if you
It
allow
just you
one
can't.
party to be the
Right.
deliverer of the solution, then you might feel that that's going to harm the authority of your party. So therefore, you feel better
Well,
off without a
it's not
solution at
even
all.
that. It's just that the moderate people on both sides are getting their support and their money or whatever from the real absolutists. And then if you did anything, you didn't run again or you were thrown out. Look what happened. There's no moderate Republicans left. You have Romney,
Yeah.
whoever thought he would be, but he had a piece, I guess, in the Atlantic that he really said we're doomed if we want Trump to be
Right,
president.
exactly. But it is one
So
of
I
the
don't
more
know.
bizarre and I think unexpected outcomes
Yeah.
of the way American democracy has worked its way through for the last
It's
couple of centuries, that
it's
we find
fragile.
ourselves in
I
this
know.
position now where solutions are actually not inevitable because solutions create a problem. The
Yeah,
problem being,
yeah,
the
yeah,
perpetuation of certain political
right.
mindsets.
It's true.
I mean, gosh, God forbid we should actually solve something, you know. And I do think about it even in Cambridge with some of our local things,
Yeah.
whether people are going to lose
Yeah,
their
it comes
minds
down to
over.
local and who supports who, and like you don't need that many votes to, and then you don't want to. That's what happened with rent control. They didn't. They went along because they had the people, their votes, and they didn't do anything, and then it got out of their hands because they weren't willing to tweak it at all.
Well,
So
and
I
I'll
don't know.
and looking back, I mean, I was a political candidate in 1993,
Yes, I remember that.
which was the last a municipal election while rent control still was legally on
Oh,
the
that's
books.
right.
And
Oh,
I can say that, certainly that was part of the question you as a candidate had to address was what's your position on rent control? And I
right.
get and in 1994 is when it went on the ballot and got eradicated.
What was your
But
position?
my position was, in fact, quite what we would today call nuanced. It was
Yeah.
very Clinton-esque. you know,
Okay.
it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
it was that I basically had a lot of sympathy for the smaller property owners. And I
Hmm.
kind of felt that, okay, if you're talking about a big, somebody who owns hundreds and hundreds of
Right.
units,
Or
then
even 50.
you
Yeah.
want to have a kind of
Right.
a strongly regulated
Right.
system, as long as you
Right.
know, do it fairly. Then
Right.
I had no objection to that. But I did have a lot of sympathy. And when you
Sure.
started getting down to this 8 units, 7 units, six
Well,
units,
for
five
property,
units,
anything
and
above
four,
three, anything above if it wasn't owner occupied, you were in trouble.
that's
That's really
exactly
what it
right.
was.
Yeah.
Because I
And
know I went through that with a 4-unit building, so
that's
yeah.
right. So I had a lot of sympathy for the people down the lower end,
Hmm.
and I just thought there should be some sort of a
Yeah.
graduated system that basically gave a lot more freedom and flexibility for people at the low end.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
so there, maybe I sounded like a math geek trying to explain this to people, but there were some people who started to think, oh God, somebody's talking sense here, right? But
yeah.
if you talk to the Cambridge Tenants Union, oh my God,
Oh,
they would hate you more for
absolutely.
being that way than if you were just gung-ho anti-rent control, which I
Right.
wasn't at the time. So
Right.
it was an interesting lesson
Hmm.
in the inability for people to compromise. And I do
Yeah.
remember actually in 1995, no, actually
Uh-huh.
late 1994, after the ballot question
Yeah.
passed and the city council was scrambling feverishly, trying to find some sort of a
Loophole or
interim
something.
solution,
Did they?
whatever.
They
And
couldn't
then
challenge it, could they?
and even though the statewide ballot question had gone through and basically said it's done,
Yeah.
the tenant lobby within Cambridge continued to yell, "No capitulation." And
Wow.
we were trying to say to him, says, it ain't capitulation. You lost. You're looking
Yeah.
for a compromise and an interim
Yeah.
solution now. And they would
Yeah.
just continue to go, no capitulation. And and they were ready to run out of office city councilors who weren't going to go along with
Hmm.
them, even though the battle was already over. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing in those days, but that was
Did
a good
it did
lesson too.
so the next election, did that have an impact still? Do you know?
No,
Do
no,
you
the thing
remember?
is that so it was during the state year, in 1994 election, that question 9 was on the ballot and it
Right.
was
All right.
eradicated
So then,
statewide. So was
okay.
there effects in terms of the
That's
1995
what
election?
that's what I
Yeah,
meant.
well,
Yeah.
with, at that point, there was some shifting around. Some
Hmm.
tenants were being offered the option to buy the units they
Oh,
were living in.
wow.
And with that, their
Okay.
politics probably started to shift a little
Uh,
bit.
that's
And
interesting. Yeah.
and other things that some people moved out, some people were forced out. I remember,
True.
because I
Yeah.
drove a VW bus at the time, helping
Mhm.
people move a lot in those days,
Wow.
and including people I didn't know, but people were calling me up saying, Robert, you've got a van, can you help out here? And I said, sure.
Mm.
you know
There were
uh,
people that were protected, like older people, I think were protected by certain stuff.
yeah, and if you were living in, for example, a Harvard-owned building, they had
That
certain
actually, that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah. So
provisions
maybe
that
they were
actually
the only
continued
ones.
way
Yeah.
beyond. And then there
They
was a
did.
3-year
Yeah.
phase out period,
True. Yeah.
and some people wanted to be much faster, much elongated. Basically,
Yeah.
they just wanted to buy time to bring it back. But by the year 20, it was a good while later, but when it went
Yeah.
on to as a referendum ballot question, local ballot question, I
Yeah.
think in 2003, 60% of Cambridge residents voted to not restore rent control. So
Was that, we had it on the ballot back then? I don't remember.
yeah, it was a local ballot question.
Oh, a local.
It was a pointless effort, quite
Because it
honestly.
couldn't have, it wouldn't have gone, so
E-
what, right? It
Even if
wasn't a binding,
it was
yeah,
basically, it was an appeal to the legislature. The legislature
okay,
had already
yeah.
said, no, we're not going to go against the
Mhm.
vote that happened in 1994. And the final backstop was that the governor had assured uh, people on one side of that issue that he would veto any such legislation if it came to them anyway.
Right,
So it never stood a chance. So I mean, if you were a voter, what was even the point in voting on it? But it
sure,
did bring a lot more voters that year,
sure.
and it led
Oh,
to a
yeah,
near double quota for Anthony Galuccio because he was largely
wow,
associated with the anti uh, group, and so
huh,
he benefited politically from that. And
interesting.
but slowly but surely, rent control as the defining issue in municipal elections was fading.
So what do
And
you think is the new issue, Robert?
I think that right now in
The
Cambridge,
charter, maybe in bike lanes.
well, I mean, it's the problem is it's a role, you were in kind of a roll your own period right now.
Yeah,
What are
yeah,
the defining issues? I mean, I could certainly say what I wish they were, but I think when you
yeah,
see people that
yeah,
we've been seeing, especially with social media, the
yeah,
rise of single issue advocacy. So
yes.
so you get a handful of people get together, call themselves a better Cambridge, and then they
Mhm.
go density, density, density. Okay, great.
Yeah,
And certain people are going to salute that flag, some people are not. Other people, and I remember actually back in the 1980s, it was anti-development, actually even through the 1990s, is block
well,
those
it's,
evil capitalists,
well,
right?
still, that hasn't gone away.
Right. Well, but in terms of what is the dominating issue or not, I
Yeah,
think that actually that hasn't that as it's greatly diminished from what it was. I mean,
hmm.
right now they're doing there was in the 1990s, there were down zoning petitions everywhere, and now there are up zoning petitions,
Well,
you know.
depending on what you're building, yeah, right,
Yeah, exactly.
right, yeah,
And
okay.
I've given to more than my share of meetings on this or that issue where the members of the public, in fact, quite a few, could say, "Well, you want to build a 6-story building there, an 8-story building? Why aren't you building 12? Why aren't you building 20?"
Uh,
It's very much the opposite. But
hmm.
these are political phases we go through. I try not to get too flustered by it all.
Well, I do
They
think
come
what's
and
going to
go.
happen, I think what's going to happen, it relates to the whole charter thing, which we should talk about, is that there will be a ballot question. And I think given the changing of Cambridge, that I can see Plan E greatly restructured, if not abandoned. I think people want a mayor. The one thing I would like to see, but is district-wide counselors. I don't like the way I think maybe PR. I just feel like all you have to do is appeal to your little constituency, where I think if you had to do district-wide, and then, or not district-wide, at large, and then you have I don't know what I'm
Right,
saying, but you
right.
know what I'm saying. It's a
Yeah,
little
yeah.
different than with the
Well,
way we do it.
all right,
So I wanted to hear you talk about that. Yeah.
okay, and I could talk at great length about these issues here.
Well,
You
but
know,
don't you agree that that's going to be a big ballot question at the
um,
end of this process, this charter review? Because that's what
you,
they say. It has to go to the voters,
right. So
whatever they come up with.
right. So, well, first off, the first question
Okay.
comes: do people
Okay.
care about things like structure of government?
Um,
I think people care about hot issues like housing affordability, or racial reckoning, or abortion rights, if we were talking about national
but
level. So,
Robert, they care about it if it's framed with some of those issues, and that's what
right.
it'll be.
And what
You
happened
know?
actually in the 1930s when the planning
Yeah.
charter was made available,
Uh-huh.
and and I think I was sort of waving at these at you right
Right.
before we went on the
Yeah,
air
no, because
here.
you have the
But
originals.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I applied to be on this charter review commission, didn't get appointed. That's an issue in itself. But I
It
actually
is.
have
I
some of
mean,
the
you are an
originals.
institutional memory. I mean, what did they
Right.
think you were going to dominate? They probably thought you were going to dominate the committee because you're Mr.
I
Know-it-all.
cannot
Yeah.
speak for the 3
Yeah.
city councilors who likely blackballed me. But
Right.
the truth
I
is,
just,
I mean, I
it's
know
a
a fair
shame.
amount about the charter, and I know about the history. I know
You
about
probably know more about the history
I
and the charter than anyone
right.
on there. And that's not to say other people shouldn't be on there with their views, but I hope there's
Right.
somebody on there that knows as much as you do. But I
Well,
don't
I
know.
think there are some people who certainly have the capacity to. whether they
Okay,
know it now, they will. Some pretty smart, there are a few smart cookies on there.
good.
But
All right.
I've actually took some time lately, and I've been reading
Yeah.
up the originals on the planning charter. For
Okay.
those, there's for the longest time, I noted that a lot of people equated the term Plan E with proportional
Oh,
representation elections. They
which
didn't
is
even
not, they're
no, and
two
that's not
different
it.
animals, right? Yeah.
Right. And I'll tell you something which is actually kind of funny. I mean,
Yeah.
funny and ironic in a sweet
Yeah.
sort of way.
Okay.
There was a time I thought to myself, well, okay, I think I know what the Plan E. Everybody talks about. We have a Plan E government. I said, well, what is a
Yeah.
Plan E government?
Yeah.
So I asked a few people. I said, well, it's that system where, but nobody can actually give a reference. I went looking on the city website,
What?
not a reference at all.
Really?
So what I did was I actually got the sections of the Massachusetts general laws,
Uh-huh.
as well as, the original 1941 rules for counting the ballots,
Mm,
and I got the original chapter 54A, which was repealed in the early 1970s, which outlined how our elections were run. And I said, well, if
wow.
somebody doesn't have these documented and put into a
I was
place
going
for
to
people's
say,
convenient
I
reference,
know.
then I think I have to do this. And I did it. Okay, so I had if you Googled, for Cambridge Plan E, you would go to you would end up at my site, and you would find the text of the Plan E charter.
But
And
don't you think these people have to have copies of this given to them to
well,
study the charter?
if they will, absolutely they
Okay.
will. But
All right.
and in fact, the city now does have a copy of this on their site. But I will tell
Okay.
you, and here's the funny part, which is that
They got it from you?
they got it from me. I mean, because mine has had a few embedded hyperlinks to sort of go
Yeah.
to other documents,
Yeah.
and they're still in the city's version. They didn't take them out. So
So you're there in absentia. You're
oh, I'm
there
there
in
in absentia.
absentia. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely right.
Okay.
And listen, I mean, all right. So for political reasons, and I'm sure it was political reasons.
Oh,
So I got blackballed, but that's okay. It's not like I'm going away, and I'm still
no.
going to be probably the most active participant from the general public at
Oh,
this,
because
I
they will have,
imagine.
oh, are those going to be open meetings?
Well, the thing is, now this gets to another issue, which
Because
I
they're
could
not
I
all
could
open anyway, right?
no, these would have to be. This is a official
Really?
city sanctioned body. Now,
Well,
I used to go to city council committee meetings, and this is not a city council committee per
no.
se. But if you were a person who had a fair amount to say and had some expertise, you were always brought into the conversation, and you could sort of raise your hand and participate if they allowed you to, which they often and generally did. There has been a trend in the last few
Mm,
years, especially under Zoom, to be
mm,
very dismissive of the public, basically to say, this is the public comment period of the meeting. Speak
mm,
now, and when you hit exactly 120 seconds, we're going to cut
mhm.
you off and tell you can just mail it in. It's
Well,
like this.
yeah, but in defense of that process, I mean, when you have 100 people signed up, come on, you
Oh,
just
I
can't go
listen.
on
I'm
forever,
I'm I'm
you know?
fully willing to acknowledge that reality. But the
Yeah,
thing is even at council committee meetings, they still
there should
abide
have
by
been
the
more give
same.
and take. Yeah, okay,
Council
I
committee
understand that.
meetings
Yeah,
were always much more freewheeling,
because
multiple
they were
people
in the
involved.
open and it probably was smaller and
Yeah,
things are. It's not.
right. This city
Yeah,
council
okay.
has reached a point of comfort in what is fundamentally snubbing the open meeting ideas.
Hmm,
Whether you're talking about a city council meeting where they start going on at length about some document that they do not even share with the
I
public
know.
that has
Well,
been
but then,
introduced late in the meeting.
right, but that's also been brought up by some councils themselves. So,
Oh, it's
you
been
know,
brought up actually by Heather
yeah,
Hoffman from the public, and then the councilors have
yeah, and
responded to
well,
that. Yes.
that's true. Okay,
And
but
I'm thankful to Heather for especially
all right.
bringing up that
All
point.
right, but give an example, the selection committee for the city manager, those weren't open meetings, were they?
No, but the thing is that if you're talking about a situation like that, there's a reason why under state law,
Oh,
and
because
then
of
it has to be
privacy,
done.
because it's
Privacy.
candidates and
You
stuff.
put
Yeah,
candidates coming from the outside applying for a
good point.
job,
Okay,
and
but this is,
also
okay,
let's be clear that the
yeah,
choice of a city manager
yeah,
is fundamentally just the council is making a decision about something that's already in their authority. Changing
Right.
the charter,
Okay.
if you go back to what
That's
happened
true.
in
Yeah.
past charter changes, in fact, the big one of all was when the Plan E charter came
Hmm.
about for Cambridge. There's a nice magazine article I have reprinted on my
Oh, the
website.
Colliers. Yeah,
The
we've talked
Collier's
about that.
article, it basically says that that change in the charter was not done by the elected officials. It was done by the
Mhm.
people of the city.
Who
And
saw
it was
corruption, right? And then who
who
saw
saw, well,
patronage and
they
corruption? Yeah.
saw problematic
Yeah.
aspects of the way their government was structured, and they
Hmm.
wanted to change it, and they were
Yeah.
fought by the elected officials. Now,
Interesting.
this is a very fundamentally different
Yeah.
way of doing things compared to what has now been proposed, what we now have as part of
Yeah.
our planning charter. By the way, it
Yeah.
was just, I guess it was yesterday or
Yeah.
yesterday, actually this morning, come to think of it, what I
Yeah.
did is I actually took my copy, my planning charter that has been on my website for
Yeah.
ages now.
Yeah.
And I said, one thing I forgot to do was to take those 3 ballot questions from this past fall and
Oh,
weave them
right.
in there,
Yeah.
to give sort of the amended, the
Yeah.
recently amended version. So I went doing that.
Yeah. Wow.
And I said, well, let me just make sure they're in the right place. So actually, that's when I
Uh-huh.
went to the city site and saw they actually had a PDF
Yeah.
of the revised, the latest revision in there.
Okay.
You
Okay,
know,
good. All
um,
right.
so I figured, okay, let me at least have this in a convenient place for people to look at, whether it's people on this committee or just
Yeah.
anybody, just
Yeah.
so they can actually have sort
Sure.
of definitively where you are, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was interesting because I started thinking harder
Yeah.
about the difference between how that charter came to be versus the
How
way we
this one.
change
Yeah.
charters now. I mean,
Yeah.
right now, that ballot question from last fall specifically says the only way we're going to change charters from now on is the mayor, right, who is
Yeah.
elected by councilors, shall
Yeah.
appoint a group of 4 councilors,
Huh.
who will then choose a group of
Of,
12
of,
to 18. In the end, they
yeah.
chose 15,
Yeah.
who will then make propose changes to the
Proposed
city
changes.
charter,
Okay.
right? To which will then be forwarded to the city council. But what it does not say is
Yeah.
what the council must then do, or what leverage they have. So to whatever degree it is silent on that, my personal read, and please, if somebody can correct me on
Yeah.
this wrong, but I
Yeah.
think I'm right, the
Yeah.
city council could take any recommendations from this charter review committee and reject them all,
Yeah.
amend them,
Yeah.
or propose their own,
And then
and
put it
then
on a
put that
ballot?
on the ballot.
Oh, so in other
They
words, it does, well,
fundamentally, they basically said the only entity that shall have any real say
it's the
in
council.
future changes is that whoever is
Yeah.
currently on the
Yeah.
elected body. Now, what
Well,
happens if you have an elected body where the people aren't particularly thrilled with them? They guess they
okay,
can they can boot them out in an election, I suppose.
but the charter review committee is just advisory anyway, right?
Right. It is advisory. But the thing is, had we created a charter commission, then it would
Uh-huh.
not have been. You would actually have been elected to the charter commission.
So
And
we should have
then
done that. Is that what you're saying?
I
In a
would say
way?
that it would have been preferable,
Because you need a
because
separation between who's going to decide this. And you're right, it's very
right now we are
political.
basically
very
in a
political. Yeah.
position now where the
Yeah.
incumbent city councilors pretty much have
A lot of
absolute
power.
veto power over anything and everything that comes through here.
When is the next election? Not this year. It's
No, not
next year.
till, yeah, and I think
So
the idea is to move
this will
this
be done.
process through to have it ready for that. So
Oh, and then
my
there'll be an election. Oh, my
so
goodness.
what
Oh,
it
boy.
basically means is you'll have 5 or more councilors
Mm.
may very well be
Yeah.
choosing the charter changes which they feel dovetails
Yeah.
into their own
Right.
electoral. And by the way, I have no sense about, in an ideal world, what would
Yeah.
happen when talking about charter review
Yeah.
is that everybody on that committee would be completely open to all suggestions. And I hope that will
Yeah.
prove to be the case.
Hmm.
But it's also possible, and I think there's at least some reason to believe that some
Yeah.
people are walking in there with an agenda. And,
Hmm.
so for example, there's at least one political organization who was arguing in favor of getting rid of 2-year terms in favor of 4-year terms,
Oh.
right? And by the way, all right, if you want to talk about that, that's fair game. But one thing we do not have, because people have asked me about it a lot, we have
Mhm.
no recall position,
Hmm.
recall process. If
Hmm.
people are really frustrated with a particular city council, or if there's something really serious problem and they want to like boot somebody out, we can't do it. The
Do other cities
recall,
do that? Do other
yes,
cities have it?
some places do
Yeah.
it. The recall, the way we do a recall in Cambridge is the next
Yeah,
municipal election. Is
because
in
it's 2 years.
everybody's up for re-election every
Well,
2
maybe
years.
that's why you should keep it every 2 years.
I actually would argue that that's exactly what it should be. It should remain at two
Yeah,
years. Or
yeah,
if somebody is absolutely insistent on making it 4-year terms, then they're going
yeah.
to have to weave in a recall
Right, right.
provision into the new charter, which will not be called the Plan E charter, because the charter, our current Plan E charter is called
Mhm.
that because it was part of a provision, a subset of the
Yeah.
Massachusetts general laws. And the planned charters, A, B, C, D, E, are gone. They don't
Mhm.
exist anymore. So it would be kind of silly to continue to call it the Plan E charter if you were to revise it. It's
Right,
already a
and
little
then
silly too.
I know, and then the 4-year thing seems to go along with people that might want a mayor, because then if you have the councilors 4 years, you're not going to just appoint a mayor for 4 years. You're going to have an elected mayor. And then if they want all that, then they're going to have to get rid of you have to get rid of PR and have
In my, in,
either at large or
well,
district or something.
all right.
Yeah.
Well, that's another
Kind of
question.
like Boston,
We can
Yeah.
talk more about that. But the thing is
Yeah.
that
In the next half
proportional
hour. Okay.
representation was an integral part of the Plan E charter of a
Right. But if that,
so-called weak mayor, strong city manager,
right.
with the
Okay.
PR elected
Right. But
council.
I'm just saying, if that changes, then you're going to have to change
Right.
maybe that
I
system.
mean,
I don't know.
increasing the authority of an
Yeah.
elected PR council is a prescription for disaster if
Absolutely.
you look at history,
Yeah. No, I
right?
agree with you. Yeah,
So,
yeah. All right,
so
so all right, so the next segment, we can finish up on
yeah,
that
I
and
can
maybe talk
go a
about
little bit
some local
more
stuff.
on that topic
Yeah,
here.
I
Yeah,
think it's very
so
important. So,
it is very much. So anyway, we'll be back in
all right, we'll be
a
back
few
in
minutes
a
on
few
Cambridge
minutes.
Inside Out.
Okay, see you.